For weeks, the world has been holding its breath, staring at a ticking clock that seemed to be counting down to an all-out global catastrophe. We were hours, literally less than 2 hours, away from a deadline that promised to change the map of the Middle East forever. But tonight, the air feels different. The silence isn't the eerie quiet before a storm. It's the sound of a massive collective sigh of relief. In a move that almost no one saw coming this quickly, Iran and the United States have just stepped back from the absolute brink. A 2-week ceasefire has been officially triggered, and the venue for what could be the most important meeting of the century has been set: Islamabad, April 10th. I've been tracking every move in this escalation, and honestly, the tension was becoming suffocating. Just when it felt like the first missiles were about to fly, the Supreme National Security Council in Tehran and the White House both blinked. But don't let the word peace fool you just yet. This isn't a white flag from either side. It's a high-stakes tactical pause. While the world celebrates a 15% drop in oil prices and markets are surging, the reality on the ground is that both sides still have their hands firmly on the trigger. The breakthrough didn't happen in Washington or Tehran. It happened through a frantic diplomatic bridge built by Pakistan. The deal is simple on paper but incredibly complex in reality. The U.S. suspends its planned strikes on Iranian infrastructure, and in return, Iran opens the Strait of Hormuz, the world's most vital oil artery, which they've had in a chokehold. But as I dig deeper into the statements coming out of Tehran, there's a catch. They aren't calling this the end of the war. They're calling it a test. April 10th isn't just a date for a meeting. It's the day we find out if this was a genuine breakthrough or just the eye of the storm. For me, the most shocking part of this whole situation isn't just that they're talking, it's the demands being put on the table. Iran isn't coming to Islamabad with a white flag. They've arrived with a 10-point plan that, if signed, would fundamentally rewrite the rules of the Middle East. I've been reading through the details of this proposal, and it's bold. We're talking about a complete withdrawal of U.S. combat forces from regional bases and the total lifting of all primary and secondary sanctions. But here's the kicker that has everyone in Washington on edge. Iran is offering to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, but with a massive asterisk. They're calling it regulated passage. Essentially, they want the world to acknowledge that they hold the keys to the world's most important oil lane. President Trump has called this 10-point plan workable, which is a word I never thought I'd hear him use in the same sentence as Iranian proposal. While people are literally dancing in the streets of Tehran and oil prices are plummeting back to earth, the mood in Tel Aviv is a lot more somber. Prime Minister Netanyahu was quick to release a statement that chilled the room. He welcomed the ceasefire, but made it crystal clear that Israel's operations against Hezbollah in Lebanon are not part of this deal. So while the U.S. and Iran are putting their guns down for 14 days, the Northern Front is still a powder keg. It feels like we're watching two different movies at the same time, one of sudden peace and another of a war that refuses to die. What's even more fascinating is the role of the mediator here. It wasn't the UN or some European power that broke this deadlock. It was Pakistan. I'm looking at the reports now, and it's clear that Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif and the Pakistani military leadership have been working the phones for days, acting as the secret bridge between Tehran and Trump's inner circle. Islamabad is now the center of the diplomatic universe. On April 10th, the delegations will sit down at a table where the stakes aren't just about a local war, it's about the global economy. The pressure on this meeting is unbelievable. Trump is already framing this as a total and complete victory, claiming on Truth Social that Iran has had enough and is ready for his golden age of the Middle East. But don't let the rhetoric fool you. In Tehran, the Supreme National Security Council is sending a very different message. They've stated that their missiles remain fueled and ready. They've only agreed to suspend defensive operations if, and only if, U.S. strikes stop completely. It's like two boxers who have stopped punching for a second, but are still standing in the middle of the ring with their gloves up. And then there's the Strait of Hormuz. This is the biggest chess piece on the board. For the next 14 days, Iran says safe passage is possible, but here's the detail that caught my eye. It has to be coordinated with Iran's armed forces. That's a massive shift. Essentially, the U.S. is temporarily accepting a reality where Iran controls the world's most vital energy artery. If April 10 goes south, that artery could snap shut again in an instant. We are literally living through the most delicate 336 hours in modern history. As we count down to the April 10th summit, the atmosphere is thick with a strange mix of hope and paranoia. I've been monitoring the chatter from intelligence circles, and the big question everyone is asking is, what happens if the talks fail? This 2-week ceasefire isn't a permanent peace treaty. It's a high-pressure cooling-off period. Right now, the U.S. carrier strike groups are still positioned in the North Arabian Sea, and Iran's Revolutionary Guard hasn't moved a single missile battery away from the coast. They are essentially staring at each other across a very thin line. The logistics of the April 10th meeting are already becoming a spectacle. We're hearing that the Pakistani government has turned Islamabad into a fortress, ready to host the highest-level direct engagement between these two powers in decades. For the U.S., this is a chance to stabilize the global economy and claim a massive diplomatic win before the next election cycle. For Iran, this is about survival, getting those crushing sanctions off their back without looking like they've surrendered their regional influence. But here is what keeps me up at night: the spoilers. There are groups and regional players who benefit from this conflict and absolutely hate the idea of a U.S.-Iran rapprochement. I'm talking about hardliners on both sides who see any compromise as a betrayal. If a single stray drone or a deniable proxy attack happens between now and April 10th, this whole ceasefire could go up in flames before the delegates even land in Pakistan. We are walking on eggshells, and the world is watching to see who, if anyone, slips first. What's really flying under the radar right now is the massive economic shift happening behind the scenes. While the headlines are focused on the will they or won't they of the April 10th meeting, the global markets are already reacting as if the deal is done. I've been watching the charts, and the sudden drop in oil prices is more than just a fluctuation. It's a sign that the big players believe this ceasefire might actually hold. But that's exactly what makes this situation so dangerous. The world is banking on a peace that is currently held together by nothing more than a few signatures and a temporary promise. Inside Washington, the political divide is widening by the hour. On one side, you have the administration framing this as a masterclass in maximum pressure diplomacy. On the other, critics are sounding the alarm, claiming that by agreeing to sit down while Iran still maintains regulated passage over the Strait of Hormuz, the U.S. is essentially recognizing Tehran as the new gatekeeper of the world's energy. It's a massive gamble. If the talks in Islamabad lead to a lifting of sanctions, it would be a total reset of the Middle Eastern order. But the real mystery remains. Why now? Why did Iran, after months of escalating rhetoric and military posturing, suddenly agree to a ceasefire just 2 hours before a major deadline? Some analysts are suggesting that the back-channel pressure from China and Russia played a role, while others think Iran's internal economic pressure finally hit a breaking point. Whatever the reason, the stage is set. We are less than a week away from a meeting that will either go down as the beginning of a new era of stability or the final failed attempt at diplomacy before the real fire starts. But here's the detail that has the Pentagon and energy experts sweating. This ceasefire isn't a return to the old status quo. It's a temporary experiment where Iran is testing its power. As part of the Pakistan-brokered deal, Iran has agreed to open the Strait of Hormuz, but they are doing it on their own terms. I've been looking at the maritime reports, and for the next 14 days, ships aren't just sailing through freely, they are coordinating with the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. In a move that is absolutely blowing up the financial world, reports are emerging that as part of this 2-week pause, Iran and Oman may actually be allowed to charge transit fees for ships passing through the waterway. Think about that for a second. We went from the brink of World War III to a reality where the U.S. might be silently acknowledging Iran's right to tax the world's oil supply. It's no wonder Trump is calling this a total victory, while his critics are calling it a strategic surrender. And the clock is ticking faster than you think. While Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif is preparing the red carpet in Islamabad, the actual fighting hasn't fully stopped. Even last night, there were reports of strikes in the region that many fear were pre-programmed before the ceasefire went live. It's a ghost war. Missiles still in the air while the leaders are shaking hands. The world is staring at April 10th as the day of salvation. But I can't help but wonder if we're just being given a 2-week window to prepare for a much bigger explosion. Gemini said this 14-day window isn't just a pause, it's a transformation of how the world operates. For the first time in history, we're seeing a U.S. President, Donald Trump, actively negotiating the terms of a regulated passage through the Strait of Hormuz. I've been looking at the leaked memos from the State Department, and the language is startling. They aren't calling it an Iranian blockade anymore. They're calling it military management of maritime traffic. That shift in words is the difference between war and a new, uncomfortable peace. As the delegations pack their bags for Islamabad, the tension in the Gulf hasn't actually disappeared. In fact, just hours before the ceasefire officially kicked in, I saw reports of one last volley of strikes, U.S. jets hitting military infrastructure on Karg Island and Israeli warplanes targeting Iranian rail networks. It was as if both sides wanted to land one final punch to ensure they were entering the talks from a position of strength. Even now, with the ceasefire in effect, the hands remain on the trigger. Iran has explicitly stated that this is not the end of the war. It's a test of American sincerity. What's even more incredible is how quickly the global landscape is shifting. Pakistan, once just a regional player, is now the primary host of what could be the most significant peace summit of our generation. Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif and General Asim Munir have effectively pulled the world back from the edge of a civilizational death, as Trump put it. But as I watch the markets rally and oil prices dive, I can't help but feel that we are in the eye of a hurricane. The calm is here, but the storm is still swirling all around us, waiting for April 10th to decide which way it moves. As we inch closer to that April 10th deadline, the atmosphere in Islamabad is becoming surreal. I've seen reports that the city is effectively shutting down to accommodate the massive security requirements for both the American and Iranian delegations. This isn't just a meeting, it's a high-stakes poker game where the stakes are literally the global economy. If these talks succeed, we're looking at a world where oil flows freely again and the threat of a massive regional war retreats. But if they fail, the snapback could be more violent than anything we've seen so far. The most fascinating part of this Islamabad protocol is what's happening in the background. My sources are suggesting that a secret non-aggression pact is being drafted right now. It's not just about the US and Iran. It's about creating a buffer zone where neither side can be blamed for accidental escalations. For the next few days, every radar screen in the Middle East is being watched with a level of intensity that is frankly terrifying. One mistake, one rogue commander, or one technical glitch could reignite the fuse. Despite the smiles and the diplomatic language coming out of Pakistan, the invisible war is still raging in the digital world. While the missiles have stopped flying, the cyber attacks have actually spiked. It's as if both nations are trying to gather every last bit of leverage before they sit down at that table on April 10th. We are living through a historical glitch, a moment where the world has paused, but the underlying tensions are still vibrating at a frequency that could shatter this peace at any second. What's truly wild is how this ceasefire is being felt in our everyday lives. Within 48 hours of the announcement, I saw gas prices at the local station drop by nearly 30 cents. It's a reminder that a few rooms in Islamabad now hold the power over the global cost of living. But while the world celebrates the relief at the pump, the military experts I follow are pointing to something much more calculated. Iran's agreement to this ceasefire wasn't just a reaction to U.S. pressure, it was a masterful play to buy time. By pausing the conflict now, Iran has effectively frozen the U.S. military's momentum. They've managed to stop the planned strikes on their nuclear and oil facilities without having to fire a single retaliatory missile that could have triggered a total invasion. It's a strategic deep breath. On the other side, Trump is using this peace through strength moment to dominate the news cycle, proving to his base that he can force even the toughest adversaries to the negotiating table. Both leaders are claiming victory before a single word has been spoken in Pakistan. As the world watches the clock tick down to April 10th, the Islamabad Protocol is being finalized. We're hearing rumors of a neutral zone being established in the Gulf, where international observers, possibly from Pakistan and China, would monitor the flow of oil. This would be a massive blow to the old order of U.S. maritime dominance. We are essentially watching the birth of a new G3 dynamic in the Middle East, where the U.S. and Iran are forced to share the driver's seat. The question isn't just whether they can stop fighting, it's whether they can actually coexist in a world that has changed forever over the last few weeks. It's finally happening. We are now within the 14-day window of the Islamabad Accord, and the details leaking out of the pre-summit briefings are nothing short of historic. I've been analyzing the latest reports, and it turns out this ceasefire is even broader than we initially thought. Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif just confirmed that this isn't just a pause between Washington and Tehran. It officially extends to Lebanon. For the first time in months, the skies over Beirut and northern Israel are quiet. It's a double-sided ceasefire that has effectively pulled the entire region back from the edge of a civilizational collapse. But let's talk about the Trump factor here. Just hours before the April 7th deadline, what he was calling Power Plant and Bridge Day, Trump pivoted. He credited his conversations with Field Marshal Asim Munir and PM Sharif for holding back the ISIS destructive force that was already en route. B-52 bombers were literally in the air when the order to stand down was given. Trump is now calling this a big day for world peace, but he's also keeping the pressure on, reminding everyone that if the Strait of Hormuz isn't fully and safely opened, that destructive force is only a phone call away. Meanwhile, the economic impact has been like a lightning strike. The moment the ceasefire was confirmed, oil prices, which had surged over 60% since February, didn't just drop, they dived. We're seeing WTI crude fall over 10% in a single session, and stock futures are surging as the war premium evaporates. But here's the reality check. The strait is opening under Iranian military management. Iran is claiming a great victory, suggesting they've forced the U.S. to accept their terms. The world is breathing easier at the gas pump today, but the political price of this 14-day pause is still being calculated. As we get closer to the actual morning of April 10th, the Islamabad summit has turned into a total media blackout. I've seen reports that the Pakistani military has jammed all non-essential frequencies around the red zone, creating a literal island of silence where the fate of the global economy will be decided. It's strange to think that while we're all going about our day, a few people in a high-security room in Pakistan are deciding if the world goes back to war or moves into a new era of cooperation. The latest whispers suggest that the U.S. delegation isn't just bringing diplomats. They've brought technical experts on energy and sanctions. This tells me that they aren't just there to talk, they are there to sign. But the tension hasn't evaporated. I'm seeing satellite imagery showing that Iranian fast attack. Boats are still shadowing tankers in the strait, even as they allow them through. It's a constant reminder that this peace is a choice Iran is making every hour, and they want the world to know they can take it back whenever they want. But what has me really looking over my shoulder is the reaction from the rest of the world. Countries like India and China are reportedly waiting to see if this Islamabad protocol creates a permanent change in how oil is shipped. If the U.S. and Iran actually reach a long-term deal, it would be the biggest geopolitical pivot of the 21st century. We're in the final stretch now. The planes are landing, the guards are in place, and the 14-day timer is almost at zero. By this time tomorrow, the world will either have a roadmap to peace or a front-row seat to an explosion. The reality is, as of today, April 8th, the world looks completely different than it did just 48 hours ago. We are officially in the era of the pause. The streets of Tehran are filled with people waving flags, not in protest, but in a surreal collective relief. President Trump's Truth Social feed has shifted from threats of complete demolition to praising the sagacious gesture of the Pakistani leadership. It's a complete 180-degree turn. We were literally watching the clock count down to an 8 p.m. deadline that many thought would be the start of World War III, but instead, the Islamabad protocol has taken over. But if you look closely at the fine print, the tension hasn't actually left. It's just changed its shape. While PM Shehbaz Sharif is celebrating an immediate ceasefire everywhere, including Lebanon, the Israeli leadership is already pushing back, claiming their operations against Hezbollah are a separate issue. It's a mess of conflicting promises. Iran has agreed to let ships through the Strait of Hormuz, but they are calling it regulated passage. They aren't giving up the waterway. They are showing the world that they own it. Every tanker moving through those waters right now is doing so only because a commander in Tehran said yes. I've been tracking the movements of the key players, and the stage is now set for Friday, April 10th. The delegations are already arriving in Islamabad. This isn't just about stopping the bombs. It's about a 10-point proposal from Iran that demands the total withdrawal of U.S. combat forces from the region. Trump says it's workable, but the Pentagon is silent. We are entering the most critical 48 hours of the 21st century. The world has 2 weeks to find a permanent solution, or we go right back to the edge of the cliff. The atmosphere is electric, but it's a nervous kind of energy. Today, April 8th, the world is waking up to a reality that seemed impossible just 24 hours ago. We were literally less than an hour away from Donald Trump's deadline, a deadline that promised to obliterate Iranian infrastructure and power plants when the gears of war suddenly ground to a halt. A 2-week ceasefire is officially in effect. The planes are being refueled, but they aren't taking off. The missiles are still in their silos. For the first time in months, there is a path forward that doesn't involve total destruction. I've been tracking the fallout of this announcement, and the sheer scale of the diplomatic shift is mind-blowing. Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, who has emerged as the ultimate bridge builder in this crisis, announced that the ceasefire is effective immediately, and most importantly, everywhere. He's claiming this includes Lebanon, which would mean a total pause in the fighting between Israel and Hezbollah. But here's where it gets complicated. Israel just released a statement that hit the room like a bucket of ice water. They support the pause with Iran, but they've made it clear that Lebanon is not part of their deal. We have a ceasefire that half the players say is total and the other half say is partial. And then there's the Strait of Hormuz. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi confirmed that for the next 14 days, the world's most vital oil artery is open, but with a massive catch. He says passage is possible only through coordination with Iran's armed forces. It's a tactical masterstroke. Iran hasn't retreated. They've forced the world to acknowledge them as the official managers of the strait. Trump is already framing this as a victory on Truth Social, but in Tehran, they're calling it a test. April 10th in Islamabad isn't just a meeting, it's a high-stakes showdown where the U.S. will have to decide if they can live with Iran's 10-point plan or if this 2-week breath is just the calm before the ultimate storm. As we look toward the next 48 hours, the focus shifts entirely to the Islamabad Accord. I've been analyzing the 10-point proposal Iran is bringing to the table, and it is far more ambitious than anyone expected. It's not just about stopping the immediate threat of strikes. It's a demand for a total strategic reset. They are calling for the complete lifting of all primary and secondary sanctions and the withdrawal of U.S. combat forces from regional bases. In exchange, they are offering stability, but a stability that is managed by Tehran. The global economy is currently riding on the hope that Donald Trump and the Iranian leadership can find a middle ground on April 10th. We've already seen a massive 15% drop in oil prices just on the news of the talk, which is the single biggest one-day relief the markets have seen in years. But this relief is incredibly fragile. If the U.S. delegation walks away from that table in Islamabad without a signed framework, those prices won't just go back up, they will explode. We are essentially living in a 14-day bubble, and every second that passes brings us closer to the moment that bubble either expands or bursts. What fascinates me is the silence from the other regional powers. While Pakistan has taken center stage as the mediator, the rest of the world is watching to see if this test of sincerity actually holds. For the next week and a half, the Strait of Hormuz will be the most watched piece of water on the planet. Tankers are moving again, but the Iranian Revolutionary Guard is right there, making sure every captain knows exactly who allowed them through. This isn't just a ceasefire. It's a demonstration of a new world order where the rules are being written in real time. In the end, we are looking at a map of the Middle East that has been fundamentally redrawn without a single treaty being signed yet. As the sun sets on April 8th, the 14-day countdown is officially ticking. We moved from the brink of total annihilation to a fragile, high-stakes silence, all because of a 10-point plan that many in Washington thought was dead on arrival. But President Trump has called it a workable basis, and that alone has changed everything. For the next 2 weeks, Iran holds the keys to the Strait of Hormuz, and the world holds its breath to see if this regulated passage becomes the new normal. The real test begins on Friday, April 10th, in the heart of Islamabad. If those talks succeed, we could be looking at the total withdrawal of U.S. combat forces from the region and the lifting of decades of sanctions, a complete golden age reset, as Trump is calling it. But we can't ignore the cracks in the foundation. Israel has already signaled that their fight in Lebanon isn't over, and Iran's Revolutionary Guard still has their fingers on the trigger, warning that the war isn't officially over until the ink is dry on a final deal. So, here we are. The missiles are silent, the oil is flowing, and the diplomats are heading to Pakistan. We have been given a 14-day window to decide if the 21st century will be defined by a historic peace or the most violent explosion we've ever seen. The world is betting on Islamabad, but in this region, the only thing you can truly count on is that nothing is ever as simple as it seems. We are in the eye of the storm, and April 10th is the day we find out if we're walking into the light or deeper into the dark. This is the end of the story, for now. Stay tuned, because the next 336 hours will change the world forever.